The study area, what were we asked to do? We were asked to offer recommendations to facilitate the redevelopment and revitalization of the North Nevada corridor, from the north edge of the old North End neighborhood to the south, Austin Bluffs Avenue to the north, the railroad right-of-way to the east, and the Monument Creek watershed to the west, as well as looking at surrounding areas of influence. I think what the panel has realized is Colorado Springs just enjoys the extraordinary natural beauty of this mountain setting. It's a place where you as residents want to call home, and visitors want to regularly be attracted here and visit. And the panel has observed the rich history of generosity and proud spirit of the city, which is evident in all that's been accomplished here. The U.S. Olympic Committee presence and the new venue additions through the City of Champions initiative represent successful outcomes which have been brought about through the collaborative efforts that we see between the public and private sector and philanthropy, and all within a highly conservative attitude on fiscal matters. The many military installations here, including the Air Force Academy, is a significant and distinguishing factor for Colorado Springs as well, as you know. You have much to celebrate, and you're now at a juncture, we believe, in the community to determine what you want your city to be in the future and how you want to be known. Our panel has made some observations that we want to share with you. We've observed that you enjoy a plethora of plans and committees and organizations that do, didn't know I was going to get laughter on that one, but that do very important work. But we also observe that there has often been difficulty in finding what the real priorities are, or to be able to focus, or the ability to act quickly among the leadership because of that plethora of organizations. And then with the many partnerships, boards, districts, and authorities, the division of responsibility and accountability remains difficult to determine. Well, the North Nevada Avenue corridor, which, as we all know, was once part of the county, now has the opportunity to bring city standards to the area. And to do so, the area will need a focused strategy to create synergy, to generate economic development, and to build true community. There should be a clear concept of community expectations and thorough guide for transition to meet the goals for economic development and community development at the local level. The panel recommends a community-based, proactive, and thoughtful planning approach to establish the best direction for redevelopment in this area. Leadership and stakeholders must be able to understand what their role is in bringing strength to the engagement process, those leaders and stakeholders from government, business, and the civic sectors. And the need for partnerships and collaborations will continue. Those must happen across the board to ensure strategically focused decision-making in the community. The panel believes that success will be achieved if you put in place a singular champion, and we recommend that that sole responsibility and accountability should reside in a new entity, the champion represented by the establishment of a new redevelopment corporation, where their only task is to look at this corridor and deal with the needs and make the decisions on a day-to-day basis. So you'll hear more about this later in the report. But right now, let's look forward 10, 20, 30 years. Let's go back to the future, if you will, and imagine what North Nevada Avenue can be. Over the coming decades, for this area to really capitalize upon the assets that you have here and to create a neighborhood which both grows new aspects of and supports the existing economy of Colorado Springs, the panel recommends the North Nevada Corridor redevelopment focus upon specific drivers toward that transformation. And these drivers should contribute to overcoming the existing barriers that we see of ownership, leadership, and resources. To piece this North Nevada Avenue area into the fabric of Colorado Springs And to complement the work that's already transpired in the downtown and on the UCCS campus, the panel recommends that you transform this corridor into a thriving, diverse, sustainable, innovation neighborhood that is authentic to Colorado Springs. A neighborhood, if you will, rooted in aerospace and defense, health and sports tech, and climate security and resilience. Expanded opportunities should be created along with a sense of place for talent and growth. The panel recommends maintaining balance between old and new. They recommend that we connect the uses in the area to the reimagined community, to education, to economic development, and workforce development opportunities. You're going to hear from our panelists around the following opportunity sectors, as we call them, which build upon much of the work, again, that's already been completed in the community. And in addition, we want you to recognize the potential for overlap among these opportunity sectors. Create R&D tech hub for cyber, engineering, aerospace, and defense. Focus on health and wellness through medical research, hospital partnerships, and a connection between medical and industry. Sports performance tech with a collaborative business center, Olympic facilities, and youth sports programs. And develop an active innovation neighborhood, providing housing affordability, supportive amenities, and spaces for arts and entertainment. The panel wants you to think differently, to think of the North Nevada Corridor not as merely a connection in your community, but as a definable and valuable space. Again, think of it as a neighborhood. The panel aspires for these recommendations to reinforce the demonstrated capability and accomplishments through past planning within the corridor. We want to give you a renewed vision and the unrestrained encouragement to move forward. You're going to hear presentations from our panelists under the headings of current market conditions, the development program including infrastructure and utilities, housing and transportation, design, catalyst sites, the connection to Monument Creek, and finally, implementation. So let's get started, and first I'm going to turn it over to David Greensfelder.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is David Greensfelder. I'm the founder and managing principal of Greensfelder Real Estate Strategy. We work on place-based plans across the country, very similar to this. And thank you, Glenda, for your comments. I'd like to key in on a few things that are really needed to function, needed for an innovation district, innovation neighborhood to function well. The first is proximity to a university. The second is an environment in which knowledge workers want to live. And the third is an abundant supply of those knowledge workers themselves. Colorado Springs is a diverse community with some enviable demographic attributes. For example, the community has seen 25% population growth in just the past 15 years. Housing permit activity reflects this growth. The cost of living in Colorado Springs is considered more reasonable than in nearby Denver. 44% of your population has a BA degree or above. This metric correlates with income, but also with the sort of worker that will be in demand in the study area as envisioned. While military makes up only 6.5% of the region's workforce, the employment impact is significantly greater when military and defense-adjacent jobs and industries are considered. Overall, El Paso County is at what economists consider to be full employment with less than 5% unemployment rate. Perhaps reflecting people moving to where the cost of living is more manageable, both household and per capita incomes are lower than in the state of Colorado as a whole. When thinking about how a neighborhood might be programmed, it's important to look at the region's economy. The Colorado Springs economy is distinct for many reasons, including its diverse mix of industries to which Glenda alluded. Military employs approximately 36,000 persons across 5 installations, yet it creates many, many more military and defense-adjacent jobs. In addition, defense, aerospace, tourism here is a huge economic driver. The healthcare industry is represented by 2 major health systems. Technology is an increasingly important part of the local economy. Organized sports is a true differentiator for your community. And finally, higher education is a key economic driver and will be a key driver of this innovation neighborhood. An opportunity like an innovation neighborhood to which Glenda alluded means that economic drivers need to align with place. I want to highlight this intersection of interest not only because of the economic opportunity that it represents, but also because of the opportunity to rethink the study area, not just as an area that one transits through or as a blighted zone with undesirable uses, but as a place in its own right that has the potential to be an important, vibrant, and resilient part of the Colorado Springs ecosystem. The study area has many strengths located together in the right geographic part of Colorado Springs. It's centrally located, ripe for redevelopment, and in close proximity to UCCS. The timing is now because the area enjoys solidly performing real estate in all asset classes, and specifically for the study area in office and light industrial. Office has some near-term risk associated with corporate office campuses in the area, but has been healthy from a rent growth and stable occupancy perspective. Medical office, even more stable. Industrial land is also strong. The area is supply constrained, with existing, even obsolete warehouse buildings fetching healthy rents on a triple net basis and selling for healthy valuations. The area is well served by nearby retail. Of all asset classes, retail is the most sensitive on location, and retail is predictably located at key intersections with high traffic counts as opposed to mid-block along the corridor. There'll be some opportunistic retail opportunities in the study area, but overall they'll be modest compared to the adaptive reuse potential of industrial land for R&D, warehouse, and office uses. The area has a strong housing market from an occupancy perspective. While not fancy, many manufactured home communities that we observed were well-kept, active communities, and they fill an important void in the Colorado Springs housing market. Best uses for the study area are those that can easily adapt and backfill warehouse space, as evidenced by UC's cybersecurity facility, but also residential and a focus on clean and safe, for which there is a real need. This begs looking at the opportunity to adapt existing buildings to R&D or office uses, and to consider new office construction for a variety of uses, including housing and modest amounts of amenity retail. Creating certainty is key for successful redevelopment. A lack of a master plan with the appurtenant zoning and design standard updates, combined with outdated or missing infrastructure, is doing the corridor no favors. The zoning code can be used strategically to create desired landowner and developer behaviors. For example, upzoning properties so that greater density can be built than is presently allowed will result in a higher residual land value. These higher values will translate into higher transaction prices, and that may incent holdout landowners to trade their properties, allowing needed assemblages to occur. Density and development bonuses can be leveraged to incentivize desired building and land use typologies. Again, for example, allowing a higher floor area ratio in exchange for public green space and connectivity between projects will benefit both developers and the neighborhood as a whole. Codifying these strategies also removes development uncertainty and will result in shorter pre-development timelines. There is benefit to co-location and collaboration. The study area has great potential for businesses to co-locate with each other, with UCCS, and with other nearby institutions, such as the Department of Defense and the Olympics community. In short, capital follows talent. Talent follows place. Place needs investment. There are a couple ways to think about economic development. The first is to make a significant investment in the right thing that jumpstarts other economic development around it. Examples range from Denver's Union Station, Lodo, and Rhino neighborhoods to the economic development that the High Line in New York fostered once it opened. The second is to let the market respond by building new product in response to increases in demand. This approach may be better suited to assembling smaller properties, not under common ownership. In the case of the study area, here's how we recommend you think about redevelopment along the corridor. Look for opportunities to make key investments in opportunity sites with enough scale to make a splash along the corridor and in coordinated infrastructure investment in roadway and utility improvements. To make an even bigger impact, investment could be made in cooperation with partners where there are intersecting co-benefits, such as UCCS partnerships in the study area with opportunity sector players. With that kickstart in hand, decisions can be made about whether to bite off another signature project, to transition to the more balanced development approach that I described, or both. And finally, infrastructure is a condition precedent to creating opportunity and to foster the development of an integrated neighborhood. It must be addressed programmatically at the neighborhood level as opposed to at the project level. In the study area, the question is how best to utilize the abundant right-of-way to foster the development of an innovation neighborhood and to create co-benefits. North Nevada Avenue needs improvement end-to-end. State law adds challenges such as addressing stormwater and water quality. There's an opportunity to deal with these things from a district-wide perspective. As you can see, the transformation can be absolutely eye-popping. I'd like to take this opportunity to hand things off to Michael, who will do our next session.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Samuelian from Cornell Tech in New York City. I wear a couple of different hats at Cornell. I'm the Director of Campus Planning and Sustainability, and I also run a small think tank focused on urban technology. Based on a lot of the features that David shared with you in the region as we were studying over the past week, what makes Colorado Springs strong, what makes it different, what makes it unique, we see a growing population, we see a highly educated population, and we see an impressive and incredible collection of really important institutions that can get involved here. So we've honed in on the idea of creating an innovation neighborhood, and we use the word neighborhood as opposed to district, and you'll see why later in the presentation, but I'm going to show you a bunch of ideas on what makes an innovation district tick. And as a resident academic, they asked me to give you kind of a Innovation District 101 on what makes neighborhoods innovative. Now, there are a number of features, there are 10 in all, but I'll go through these relatively quickly. I mean, what's absolutely critical in most innovation neighborhoods across the country is the fact that you have an anchor institution. We have great institutions in this neighborhood, but that's absolutely crucial for success to actually have an institution that could really help be the rallying cry for bringing people together. Similarly, innovation neighborhoods also are clusters where academia and industry come together in important ways to undertake research, to help startups, and to really help scale technologies. And then something also unique to innovation neighborhoods is the fact that they tend to occur in areas, not unlike this, in older parts of town, where there's adaptive reuse, taking an old building and rethinking it, and giving a neighborhood a degree of authenticity that you don't often find in newer parts of the district. In terms of space, helping startups grow and helping them really excel in terms of their technologies, startups are unique in terms of needing a lot of space. They are very small in the beginning, and then they tend to grow very quickly. So having incubator space, which you already start to have in this district, is critical to helping to bring the tech ecosystem together. Also, many of these startups, they're not well capitalized, but they need very expensive types of spaces, like maker spaces. So having shared degrees of spaces where you could have expensive equipment where people can work on hardware together or prototyping is crucial to helping these startups kind of begin to get to the growth stage. And then similarly to a space like this, collaboration spaces, the tech ecosystem is very interactive, and there's a lot of back and forth between funders, between investors, between customers, so having convening spaces where people can come together, really supercharging the network, is crucial to success. At a more granular level, and something that may seem a little bit in the weeds to talk about when we're talking about a huge mile-and-a-half district here in Colorado Springs, but coffee culture, having these kind of third places where casual collaborations actually happen is incredibly important to really bringing the ecosystem together, kind of creating workspaces, but also casual places to come together. And something you may not think about when you consider technology companies, but in the words of Richard Florida, a renowned urbanist thinking about cities in the 21st century, tech workers are creative workers. They're part of what we call the creative class. So I want you to start to think about the idea of bringing creative industries in with technology. It helps draw tech workers to the neighborhood, but it also is a way of kind of hyper and supercharging attraction to a particular district. And all of this is not, for the developers in the room, it's not about buildings. I mean, we know that. It's about the customer. It's about drawing and attracting talent to this district, but also retaining talent, making sure that graduates from UCCS, folks coming out of the military stay in Colorado Springs and help to build it and grow it into a larger neighborhood. And in many cases, this can be incredibly powerful. And now this is maybe aspirational, but this is Cambridge Crossing in Kendall Square, Boston. But in many cases, these innovation districts and mature innovation districts, which are real powerhouses across the country, they start as these relatively small and scrappy neighborhoods in town, and they grow because in many ways, small tech companies, startups attract big tech companies. There's a great back and forth in that ecosystem between small tech companies and larger ones. And so we're going to go a little bit from theory into practice right now. There are many great examples of tech innovation districts and innovation neighborhoods in our new word across the country. This is my home, Cornell Tech in New York City, which is a great example of how a city, and this was led by the city during the Bloomberg administration, really leveraged a research institution to create an engine of economic development. And this engine has been incredibly successful. We're barely a decade old, and already we recently did an economic impact report last year, and it showed that 650 students generate $750 million in economic impact for New York City, which comes out to about $300,000 per student of economic impact in the city, which is impressive even by New York City standards. And since we're growing at a rate of about 14% a year, those numbers will double by 2030. And this very, very small campus will be generating $1.5 billion in economic impact in New York. We already generate nearly 2,800 jobs, and that will again double to about 3,000 jobs a year in 2030. But we also focus on startups. So it's not just big tech, it's not just deep research. Already we've incubated over 115 companies. And what's most important for maybe the politicians in the room, 95% of those companies stay in New York City. So it's not just about training people, but training them and making them stay. And they're staying because of the strength of the ecosystem, not the technology itself, but the ecosystem that New York City is giving them. And those 117 companies are already directly employing over 500 people in the city. Now, you don't have to create a Cornell Tech by any means. Closer to home, Fort Collins, Colorado, anchored by Colorado State University, is focused on the innovation economy, similar to Cornell Tech, but with a real focus on smart cities, something close to my heart, and focusing on the climate economy as well. So there are different flavors to what innovation districts and innovation neighborhoods can be. Two other examples of mid-sized cities in Madison, Wisconsin, or Chattanooga, Tennessee. You create your own innovation neighborhood. You could focus, in the case of Wisconsin, on statewide initiatives, focusing on biosciences, or in Chattanooga, focusing on a more community-oriented innovation neighborhood. So there's a lot of choice here when it comes to thinking about what type of neighborhood you're going to be. Now, we've laid out two basically a two-pronged strategy for what we're calling neighborhood economic development. As Glenda showed you, we have 4 different opportunity sectors that we're describing that are kind of themes, for lack of a better term. And these themes can be mixed and matched. You could lean into one of them, you could lean into 2 of them, you could lean into all 4 of them if you want. But these are different high-level themes when we look at the strengths of this district. But none of these can happen, in our view, without some foundational improvements to the district. Think of it like the infrastructure for the urbanists in the room, the urban armature, we call it, the kind of the bones, if you will, by which everything gets built upon. So the 4 different opportunity sectors for neighborhood development are different themes, focusing R&D Tech Hub, as Glenda pointed out. When we looked at the site, we saw that we were smack dab in the middle of a lot of major hospitals along the corridor, so focusing on health and wellness. You can't talk about Colorado Springs, I think, without addressing the Olympics and the fact that it's such a strong component of the brand and the place, so focusing on sports tech and sports performance. But also thinking about the fact that with this growing population, with historic high rental costs, affordable housing is incredibly important to making sure that you hang on to that talent, that people just don't come here and leave, but you want them to grow with the community. So for the Research and Development Hub, we think it's important to begin to leverage the relationships you have with DoD, UCCS, and the aerospace industry, focusing on developing a business park, for lack of a better term, but really focusing on incubator spaces for small companies to grow into large companies. And a great opportunity you have from a physical infrastructure standpoint is a lot of the light manufacturing spaces. These are spaces that we would call hackable. They're relatively cheap buildings that people can grow into. They could test and prototype new types of technology. So we're strongly pushing you to retain some of the light manufacturing buildings there, but looking at adaptive reuse of those buildings. Pivoting to the health and wellness, focusing on medical research, an increasingly growing part of this country's economy. Building on the strength of having UCCS, but go beyond UCCS and foster partnerships with other hospital systems. And all of that in the goal of creating commercialization of medical research and what we would call Cornell health tech. But sports and performance is something that we started to hear a little bit more about in our 100+ interviews, but having the Olympic Committee here begin to leverage that and combine it with the technology focus of the area and think about sports tech. So leverage the Olympic relationships to focus on sports performance, developing even maybe new training facilities and event venues to bring people to the community, increase tourism. But don't just go top down, also go bottom up. Make sure that you don't forget about youth and sports programs and feeder programs to really help build a healthy community. Beginning to also focus on community, thinking about expanding housing choice and diversity. As mentioned, there's already a relatively good amount of diversity, but we want you to push the density of the housing for students, for faculty, for seniors, for singles, for young families, but also making sure that you keep the eye on the ball of complementing all of the great stuff that's happening downtown, but think about this neighborhood as different and distinct from downtown, maybe denser and maybe perhaps more affordable, and that will help attract new residential amenities and also draw arts and entertainment facilities to the area. So before ceding my time to my partners, there's 3 really important foundational improvements, as we were saying, beyond these themes, which you should all begin to mull about and how you want to begin to combine any of them. The foundational improvements which have to happen for any of this to happen are to integrate your infrastructure. That is really a first mover to make any economic development happen. Strengthening connections, not just connections within the community to the creek or to the communities to the east, but also the urban connections, both north and south. And then maybe most importantly, from an economic development standpoint, densifying housing, making sure that you have far more people in this community to help service any of those sectors that you might begin to develop. Now I'd like to turn it over to my friend from Sacramento to go into the foundational improvements. Jose.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jose Bolipo Memba. I am an executive with the Sacramento Municipal Utility District in Sacramento, California. It's great to be back here in Colorado Springs. And as mentioned by my colleague, Michael, in order to really catalyze development, the infrastructure improvements do need to be a first mover. But one of the things that we want you to think about as a part of our proposal is ensuring that the utilities leaders lead not just by providing the support, but lead by proactive action and creativity. So really looking for a focus on innovation in terms of mindset, delivery, and outcomes coming out of the utility space. Two, looking at operational improvements. There's great operational foundations, but identifying incremental improvement ways to provide better support for the development community and for growth. And looking at program creativity. How do you look at new programs to incentivize development in this corridor? And lastly, leveraging the strong partnership foundation that can be seen by all of the stakeholders here today. So, as mentioned before, we've been able to interview over 100 folks, or close to 100 individuals, many of whom are in this room. We've reviewed a number of studies, including the North Nevada Master Plan, or the Renewed North Nevada Master Plan, and other documents from ERA and from UCCS. With all that information in place, we've recognized there's a really strong foundation, particularly as it relates to utilities. You have strong leadership in place, both with Colorado Springs Utilities and City's Public Works Department, and also at the board level and the city council level. That strong leadership really makes this a great time and place to be able to spur economic development in that space. Having a centralized utility, again, I come from Sacramento, where gas, water, electricity are all spread out and makes for a lot of confusion. Having most of those utilities centralized is a strength that you offer. I'm not sure if folks realize the national reputation that Colorado Springs Utilities has. They're in the top 10 for both gas and electricity delivery in their business sector size. And also, you guys offer 11%, your rates are 11% lower than the state and 17% lower than the national average in terms of electricity and gas. So you have incentives that really want businesses to focus on this area. The partnerships with UCCS, the internships, is a great foundation for all the ideas we discussed before. Additionally, from an economic development resource perspective, the strategy alignment is clear. I know you laughed earlier about the number of plans, but the good thing about all those plans, they're aligned in the same direction, and we're going to hopefully continue in that space. And the fact that there's assets in place on that corridor can actually cause or allow for some cost reduction for developing that space. So again, there's a preparation to serve in that area, both from an infrastructure standpoint and from a planning standpoint, which really is a strategic advantage. So there are challenges, and we want to be straightforward in terms of what those challenges are, and I think prioritizing those challenges is extremely important. Challenge number one is really making sure there's community buy-in related to the prioritization of investment on the North Nevada corridor. Again, there's a lot of competing priorities, but there's a lot of reasons why this area should be focused, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Two, fiber. If we're looking at some of those themes that have been discussed so far, we need to make sure that fiber timeline, which is scheduled right now for 2028 completion, needs to be on time and on schedule and delivered in the key spaces. Resources at the water, sewer, and stormwater, those improvements, again, need to be able to be on pace to meet the pace of growth to be able to serve. And then the elephant in the room is all of this costs money. How do we make sure that funding is secured and is stable to ensure the growth and development at a reasonable pace? Recognizing that a lot of the funding, particularly in the energy space, has changed in 2025. So many sources that were available a year ago, creativity is going to have to be a key component of ensuring that funding is in place. And Anthony will talk later about some ideas we have in that space. And lastly, we want to make sure that we're building on community trust and communication. It's important, we heard from interviews, that they're not sure what improvements are happening. So how do we make sure that communication takes place so folks can stay along and build trust that this is going to come to reality? So, again, we talked about being a catalyst. We want to lean in and think big. So for recommendation number one, we're looking at Colorado Springs Utilities to really be a catalyst in this space and actually lean in and reimagining the Birdsall plant as an R&D tech hub first mover. Really looking at the retirement plan in 2027 and putting that stake in the ground that this will be a place to help catalyze that growth would be an important key first step. I'd like to follow up with that to double down and lean in and really look at that space as an R&D tech space for exploring energy reliability projects. There's a number of investors throughout the United States who are looking for places to plant their flag and grow new technology, whether it be small modular reactors, micronuclear reactors, There's clean energy opportunities. There's a number of different spaces, and this is being done all over the U.S. We're actually doing it in Sacramento, where we're attracting businesses in our old facilities and growing them. This is something that Colorado Springs can catalyze on as well. We're asking that you expand on that great partnership foundation, particularly the partnership foundation between UCCS and Colorado Springs Utilities, but expand it all the way down to the K through 12, making sure there's strong workforce development and training opportunities that are connected, because that workforce is in that talent development won't just help one utility sector, it'll actually help the entire region, as there's a lot of matching skills and capabilities. We want to make sure that the planning at the utility level supports all of the opportunity sector alignments that we are proposing. So make sure there's some flexibility in that planning process to allow for those to grow. And then lastly, really be a leader in talent development and retention. Again, there's a strong energy already happening between UCCS and Colorado Springs Utilities. Grow that talent and support all the sectors that this region needs to be able to grow and recruit and retain new business. Some examples, again, so just so folks know, this adaptive reuse process occurs and it's been successful. Beloit College is a great example, a former powerhouse, a power plant and a coal power plant, 120,000 square feet. They're working with the local university and converted it into a student work play location that has been awarded a top design project in Wisconsin in 2021. Again, it's something that is architecturally dynamic, but also very useful and flexible. A hackerspace, as was said by my colleague earlier on. Another example that's a little more close to home for me is the R&D La Frentz campus run by Los Angeles Department of Power and Water. They call it the Lacey campus. It's the Los Angeles Clean Energy Incubator, or Clean Tech Incubator. But it's more than just clean tech. It's a space, again, as you can see on the screen, that has energy R&D, but also has prototype testing. It also offers energy solutions for customers, so it's a customer-facing space. And then there's a number of nonprofit and for-profit businesses that invest in that space, well over 30. I was just there 2 weeks ago. The level of activity, creativity, and new business being spurred is tremendous. And again, it's a reuse of a 60,000 square foot brick building, similar to ones that we see on North Nevada Corridor. So recommendation number 2 really is the why. We need to make sure we prioritize and explain why we should be investing and then what we should be doing first. So explaining why, again, there's some key nodes that need to be communicated. The economic development benefit of that investment needs to be communicated to your customers and to your community members. There's lots of great data of what is happening, what can happen. Make sure folks realize that. The fact that developers can invest in that corridor at a lower level than greenfield development because of the existing infrastructure is something that needs to be communicated, so folks continue that investment and look elsewhere as opposed to the outskirts. Community support. There's already been community support. You did lots of outreach as a part of the Renew North Nevada Avenue master plan. You also had voter support improvements on the corridor at a very high level. So making sure folks realize this is an area that they said that they're supporting and want to see investment in. And then lastly, making sure that the developers understand the cost savings as mentioned before. And then lastly, we need to make sure we're communicating what projects are prioritized. And our recommendation is, again, making sure fiber is a high-level priority, making sure that the Birdsall plant site operations, that planning starts now, because there's a number of factors that need to be considered in terms of reactivating or reimagining that site. And then sewer and water, making sure that's ready and in the ground to be able to support new business and opportunities. Recommendation number 3, again, provide program improvements. This is some great programs. The work that Colorado Springs Utilities does in the economic development space is great. I took a look at their handbook. I've looked at a lot of the work that's being done. They have 4 dedicated staff that are in that space doing amazing work. But there's some opportunities to even enhance more programs. You have in place right now the System Improvement Program, which is great, but are there ways to incentivize infill development, particularly along this corridor, that offer additional cost savings? There's other programs that are doing that in Austin and also in Sacramento. Number 2, looking at streamlining processes. An idea that's been used very effectively is developing a commercial development portal online and identifying essentially a concierge service for development so that developers really don't have to go through different departments, but someone guides them through the process, even across between the city and the Colorado Springs utilities. It's something that's worked very successfully on the West Coast, and I think it's something you should apply here as well. And then lastly, communicate what work is being done in a way that's transparent. The City Public Works Department has a great interactive map. How do you make sure that's getting out, and maybe align that technology between Colorado Springs Utilities and the City Public Works so that there's a consistent message that the maps are overlaying because of the compatibility of all of the infrastructure work that's being done. So, in closing, last recommendation here is to communicate and fortify and grow that trust. It's important that folks know, and by doing this work here, you're always showing that commitment. Getting out into the community and making sure folks know what and why is happening, and then making sure you're going back and executing on those promises. That's how trust is truly built. But then when those things get completed, when those projects get completed, going back to the community and celebrating those victories. A lot of times work gets done in the dark, and folks don't see the progress as it's happening. So our recommendation is communicate, execute, and communicate. So I'll just leave you with this. The art of communication is the language of leadership. We've asked for the utility sector to lead in this space, and that's exactly how we'll be successful in seeing all of this vision come to fruition. And now to talk about transportation and housing, I'm bringing up Hal.
Thank you, Jose. My name is Hal Ferris. I'm with Ferris Advisors out of Bellevue, Washington. The work I did was mixed use, mixed income development, along with other community development work. I'm semi-retired now, which means I failed at retirement. So housing and transportation are not employment drivers, as are the opportunity sectors you've heard about. However, similar to infrastructure, housing and transportation are foundational elements needed to support and drive the success of this emerging neighborhood. Fast facts that we found that was provided in our briefing materials that are influential in our recommendations are El Paso County will see a 32% increase in population in the next 20 years. Colorado Springs is expected to pass Denver in population in the next 40 years. Fastest growing demographics are between ages 20 and 35 and 65 plus. Between 32,000 and 43,000 apartments need to be built to close the housing deficit gap for the projected population growth through 2028. Housing affordable to the workforce, seniors and students, is increasingly hard to find due to the high construction costs and rising interest rates. Mobile home parks. Our panel was pleasantly surprised as we toured the area and read the briefing materials and looked at the maps. There's a large amount of mobile home parks in the study area, the broader study area. These homes provide a place that is safe and secure for the residents that live there. They are a strong asset for this community. It is, and not just the local community, but Colorado Springs as a whole. Mobile home communities are frequently protected, and they would be very expensive to replace. We estimate over $400 million. We believe that this is a real strong asset for this community and needs to be part of the long-term plan for the area. North Nevada neighborhood of the future. North Nevada District is strategically located close to employment centers, educational services, healthcare, and outdoor recreation. North Nevada District can become a neighborhood that is urban, energetic, healthy, accessible, and affordable to a broad range of families and incomes. With a robust urban zoning, our panel believes North Nevada could provide homes for over 6,000 families. Why is our panel focused on housing when the questions asked by the sponsors did not dwell on housing? Why? The briefing materials had quite a bit of material, about housing in them, but it was in our interviews. Housing came up repeatedly when we met and talked with you, of which we see many familiar and friendly faces in the audience today. And affordable housing was a recurring theme throughout our interviews and discussions. So our panel felt we had to dive into this and provide some recommendations to deal with those issues. Our recommendations include changing zoning designation to be based on floor area ratio rather than units per acre to encourage a broader range of housing types. And I won't go into a bunch of geeky discussions about what that means, but what it means is that for a piece of land, you can triple the amount of housing built on that land than you can under your current zoning designations. And that density will result in a different type of housing. You'll see more studios and one-bedrooms and smaller units that will provide a complement to the housing that's being built downtown, but it will also provide a greater level of affordability for the demographic that is coming in and wants to live in this community. Additional recommendations include decreasing or eliminating parking requirements to reduce the development cost and encourage the use of the to-be-established reliable transit and flexible shared transportation options. In addition, we believe that you should increase your maximum building height from the current 60 feet to 85 feet, which is a maximum height for mid-rise buildings where you can take advantage of the lower construction materials compared to the concrete and steel that is needed for high-rise construction. And in adopting all of these changes, it's important to provide what we call incentive zoning, where you encourage the development to occur to the higher density, but you can also identify some incentives and some contributions to public benefits, including open space and affordable housing, in return for that additional development capacity. Second, there's a need for student housing to serve a broad range of students. We believe that collaboration can be done with UCCS to develop and operate purpose-built student housing in the North Nevada neighborhood, attractive to junior, senior, and graduate students. In addition, UCCS be encouraged to increase the supply of student housing on campus focused on freshmen and sophomore students in the areas shown on the campus master plan. It has statistically been shown overwhelmingly that student success is significantly improved if the student can begin their journey in higher education if they start by living on campus. Other recommendations include enhance the connections to Monument Creek, parks, and community services. We took a tour on our own, walked around, and we found our way down to Monument Creek. It's hard to find it because you have to be a detective to find the entrances to Monument Creek and there's no wayfinding sign or very little, and there's no really designated parking and want you to get down there. So we really believe that you need to improve the wayfinding and how you get to it and improve the porosity and access to the creek. It's going to be a wonderful asset. It is a wonderful asset and it's to be enhanced. It really needs to be celebrated. Further, encourage connected and healthy housing for all residents in the North Nevada neighborhood. Provide new health clinic, including mental health services, needed to support the growing community. Incentivize uses such as affordable grocery, arts, entertainment, neighborhood restaurants, coffee shops, and food halls. And modify to allow the mobile home land use that is already existing in the designated areas. That currently isn't a zoning characteristic that's allowed in your land use zone. Transportation is the key. You've heard that from Jose and others. Reliable and frequent transit is essential to the development and future of the North Nevada neighborhood. As you heard, capital follows talent, talent follows place, and place needs investment. Investment is needed to catalyze the transformation of the North Nevada urban neighborhood and to connect UCCS to downtown. The public sector needs to lead with the investment in transit and infrastructure. Current conditions, as you all know, North Nevada can be congested at peak times in the day. Alternative means of transportation, including pedestrian, bicycle, and transit, are slow, unreliable, and frequently unsafe. Streets are disconnected and limited access to UCCS downtown and Monument Creek and all regional ball fields. Our recommendations are to provide a bus rapid transit or fixed guideway with 18-hour service, 15-minute headways during peak times, 30-minute headways in off times. 60-minute headways don't work. Design BRT with fewer stops and ideally a dedicated rather than shared right-of-way. Connect transit, bus rapid transit or light rail to UCCS and downtown. Improve the pedestrian connections and wayfinding and signage to Monument Creek. And with that, I'll turn it over to Todd, who will share some of our planning ideas from the panel.
All right, how's everybody doing? Are we still, you still with us? This is the point where we invite people to stand up if you'd like and, bounce on your toes and, get some energy going. My name is Todd Meyer. My background is design and development, and you've heard a lot about our vision. Now we want to dive into a little bit of, what does that mean and how does it translate to the corridor? So as you heard Glenda and David and others talk about this, and Michael talk about the idea of an innovation neighborhood, it really is fostering this ecosystem of the university, of the city, the residents, the companies, all coming together to provide this destination. And there's very proven ways that we know how to do this. I've got experience with innovation districts in San Antonio, in Chicago, and even Dayton, Ohio, where this is a proven method to attract and retain businesses, jobs, and talent. And as Glenda mentioned in her opening, right now there's a lot of people, our perception in the Colorado Springs community, that pass through the North Nevada corridor, but unless you work or live there, it's not as much of a destination as downtown or other parts of the community. And so that's something that, as we're talking about talent attraction, I mean, this is a fantastic place to live, right? And anybody that visits Colorado Springs can appreciate the natural beauty and why it would be attractive to live here. But in many cases, that's for some, that's enough. For other people, they're looking for a combination of things that are coming together. And the university obviously brings people here. It provides a pipeline of talent. But if we are talking about people that are not coming right out of school, what is going to attract them to the area? High-paying jobs and good jobs is one, but two, it's really having the shopping, the dining, and the entertainment that go along with that provide that quality of life. So what we've looked at in terms of the corridor, and this is, forgive the dumb, rough sketches here, but as Hal mentioned, one strategy is to look at restitching the street network together. As many of you know, the North Nevada corridor was originally designed as a limited access highway, and the city took control over that some time ago. And so providing greater access, particularly east-west through the corridor, is one of our recommendations. Along with that, Hal mentioned Monument Creek, and of course, many of you know all about the grand plans for Monument Creek, but providing that east-west access from the neighborhoods and the different parts of the corridor over to Monument Creek is another important part of it. We also, Hal touched on the neighborhoods. On the east side, you've got a lot of single-family detached neighborhoods, and then along Monument Creek, you have the manufactured home communities. We think those are, as Hal mentioned, great assets, and much of those should be preserved. But in addition, we think that we can provide some market rate multifamily apartments that would support the folks that would be working in some of these new commercial office buildings. And we know that there's a lot of industrial space and fabrication space that's in the corridor. We think there's a value and a benefit to preserving some of that as well. So in the end, it becomes a rich mix of land uses and building types that are coming together. And as you see on the map here, those sort of red things with the green dots in the middle, those represent a neighborhood center, right? So imagine a mini version or a block of two of downtown where people come together and there might be shops and restaurants or places to even have mixed-use development above those places. So when we look at the corridor, there were three sites that really stood out to us in terms of where would we maybe want to start or look for early wins of where we might look at development. The Birdsall Power Plant really represents a great opportunity. We know that some of those facilities will stay online for some time, but looking to the future, what could that look like in terms of accommodating some of the vision that we're talking about? The second one is, of course, the cybersecurity building. If we can look at land around that and build on that building and expand that into more of a campus, that's the second one. And then the third one is, of course, the former Greyhound Park, which now is providing a use to the community, but we think there's probably a higher and better use that could support our notion of this innovation neighborhood. For Birdsall, here's a quick idea of what that might look like. So obviously preserving the existing building, the two existing buildings that are there. We understand there's critical infrastructure in the office building. The building, the existing building with the stacks on top, as Jose mentioned, could be an adaptive reuse. That would be a great addition to the neighborhood. And then layering in new office buildings. In this case, we tested 3-story buildings that were about 90,000 square foot each, 30,000 square feet on each level. And then just north of Nichols, we start to see maybe some of that neighborhood retail that would come in to support some of that development. So just a quick concept there in terms of what that might look like. As we look at some of the development strategies then, there's a few things that my other colleagues have mentioned about what we may want to do in terms of next steps. And the North Nevada Corridor itself provides a great opportunity to deal with this stormwater management issue that we have in the area. And we talked to a lot of folks over the last week about that, as well as the utility infrastructure that's really needed to promote the kind of development we'd like to see here. So what does that look like? Well, if we look at the corridor, there's a large median in the center of the northbound and southbound lanes on Nevada, and then we have this fairly wide former railroad easement that is on the east side of Nevada. And so if we imagine you could have ped and bike trails there that are part of the network, but then also use quite a bit of that for a regional or district-wide stormwater detention facility that would really help to facilitate that development. Another couple of ways to look at it. So the top view here, these are just a couple cartoon sections, but the top is sort of what we have today. And you can see on the left side, the right-of-way is very large. It's about 220 feet wide. And then we have another 80 feet of that railroad easement on the right. So that's a tremendous amount of area to work with. And you can see the section below would be not modifying that to a large degree, but introducing the idea. There was a recent study done for the BRT study by Kimley Horn. So this shows what that might look like, a dedicated lane there for the BRT, and then you can see the stormwater on the right. A couple of other ideas. Hal mentioned the idea of either, the BRT could be in the center. This is testing it on the edges, right, for easier boarding. And then the idea of introducing stormwater on both sides of the Nevada corridor. The previous one had parking on the west side. So, depending on how much capacity we need to deal with that stormwater issue. And then the bottom one, of course, if we're fortunate as a community in Colorado Springs to be able to get the kind of funding to be able to afford a fixed guideway, this, think trolley or streetcar or even light rail, that could be in the center of the corridor with platforms and stations. The next development strategy is, I mentioned the sort of the grid, right? And so the three black lines that you see on the screen, Fillmore, Garden of the Gods, which turns into Austin Bluffs, as you know, and then Nevada are really the key kind of arterial corridors. The blue ones are existing. And what we're proposing is that if, in order to take some of the pressure off of Nevada, complete that grid to provide more than one way to get from A to B, and two, really provide that access from folks that might live in the neighborhoods to the east and within the corridor to be able to get over to the Greenway and to the shopping, dining, and other amenities. You will see a couple of areas. I don't know if my pointer works, does it? Yeah. Right here and right here, those two would involve bridges over the drainage way. So a little bit more expensive than just building a road. We understand that. And some areas might involve acquiring and repositioning some buildings. So we understand there are some challenges there. Development strategy number 3. If we think about the neighborhood preservation and some of the preservation of the industrial area being a little bit, further away from the Nevada corridor, we're thinking about that first 400 to 500 feet from the right-of-way of Nevada. If we could focus on land acquisition there to really start to think about how those areas could be redeveloped and really re-image the corridor into this innovation district, that we feel would be the prime opportunity because it would be visible from Nevada and people could start to see the effect of the innovation neighborhood come to life. The fourth one is this identifying these nodes that would be along that corridor. And these would be those areas, think about the social gathering spaces or the village green or the neighborhood town center where people can come together. If you live or work nearby, you can you get a cup of coffee, you can grab lunch, you can meet a friend or a colleague or a business associate. It's those places that we want to come together. The dots that you're seeing are about a half a mile apart. So that means that essentially within a quarter-mile walk, which is what we envision to be about a 5-minute walk, you could easily get to one of those nodes for those convenience items and those amenities. And then finally, our final development strategy is really about image and branding of the corridor, right? That it should have clearly defined edges. You should know when you're entering the innovation neighborhood, and it should be very clear as you're moving through it that you've arrived at this place. So those clearly defined centers and nodes that I talked about, but then also things like streetscapes and signage and logos and graphics and even a color scheme that can really support and reinforce the neighborhood that we're trying to create. So thank you for your time. I'm now going to turn it over to Anthony to talk about implementation.
Good morning, everyone. Congratulations on making it this far in the presentation. We're nearly there. My name is Anthony Graves. I serve as the principal of Graves Civic Solutions, a public affairs and economic development consultancy, and I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about the rubber meeting the road for implementation. The cruel reality of economic growth is that cities across the United States and around the world are competing against each other for finite economic resources to serve their constituents. As a result, it creates fierce competition for business attraction, really thinking through startup activity, and really attracting and retaining that workforce that will power the jobs of the future. So in order to have the North Nevada corridor positioned to have the greatest competitive advantage to go out and compete for those resources for a vibrant innovation community, the Colorado Springs community, all of you and the key institutions you represent, need to come together to create a centralized authority in an agile organization. In short, North Nevada needs a champion. We strongly recommend the development of a redevelopment corporation that will aggressively push this vision for the development of the North Nevada corridor, and to really go out to find a strong CEO that will come together to represent your cumulative voices to take this community to the next level. Let's talk a little bit about what it could look like and some of the dynamics that you should consider in pulling together your community to work together around a defined presence in a corporate organization. An independent redevelopment corporation is the first thing we think is quite important, to sit outside of the city government, but to have it be a collaborative entity whereby the governance has the city, civic and business organizations, and other community voices. I believe that the more stakeholders that have pockets of influence in this community that come together in this entity, the better, so that you have numerous tools in your belt to be able to compel this organization to have significant change along the North Nevada corridor. Further, hiring a chief executive officer that really represents your cumulative voices is going to be very important, because they are going to be that senior statesperson for this organization that will bring together numerous constituencies to tell your story and to really cultivate champions, other champions out in the community. We've put on this slide here just a few logos. Many of our sponsors, thank you for having us here, which we think are automatic seats on this bus, but we believe that it should be much larger to really ensure that you have all of the entities that could really bring value. A couple that you might consider are organizations like Visit Colorado Springs, your sports commission, key foundations in the area, et cetera. Structure, roles, and responsibilities. Often, and all of us here in the audience are working for organizations or maybe have served on boards or special committees. We know that interpersonal dynamics are a critical factor in the success of these organizations. And so in setting up a redevelopment corporation, we think that the bifurcation of responsibility and a clear management and governance structure are very important. So the CEO should be solely responsible for executing the vision that is set by the board of directors and really providing that clarity and defining the roles that will drive this vision forward. They also will have the daunting task, perhaps, of taking these recommendations that we are providing to you and really thinking through what the prioritization will be and how to move it forward and make it a reality. They also have the ability to elevate issues of strategic importance to this group of stakeholders on the board of directors that can help them problem solve and really bring a level of sophistication to the decision making associated with the operations of this entity. And perhaps most importantly, you are a strong community of leaders, and each of the organizations that are represented here have gotten incredible tractions in your lanes, but each of you have your own mandate around the types of services or products that you're delivering on behalf of this community. And so that can sometimes create politicization, right, when you're working on large capital improvement projects. So having this sort of Switzerland, right, that comes together will help to depoliticize decision-making and allow you to move more efficiently forward into the future. On the governance side, this board of directors is really an amazing opportunity for you to come together and reduce silos between the respective work streams that are happening. It also gives you executive oversight of that chief executive that you hire, right? And both creating hopefully a national search for this position, and then setting key performance indicators and evaluating the performance and deliverables of that chief executive officer. One of the things that's really compelling to me is someone who thinks that every project should have a positive community impact, is trying to have some meaningful dialogue about how you keep the needs of your constituents front and center. And when you're governed by a very clear vision and mission statement that the board of directors and then that chief executive are led by, that's one of the things that will allow you to keep the voices and needs of those constituencies top of mind at every step of your evolution. So what exactly does a redevelopment corporation do? Well, I really want you to think about two sides of a coin. The first side of the coin is about strong leadership in the community that is really driving, assemblage, like bringing together all the property parcels, right? Going out, finding the deals, really helping people understand the value proposition of working on something that is bigger than themselves. And then driving, right, all of the follow-up and project management and the various contractors that really bring real estate developments to life. There's also a huge amount of back and forth, as we know, with the city of Colorado Springs and the utilities, right? Thinking through the infrastructure that Jose spent a great deal of time talking about today. And so the soft skills for this person, the follow-up and project management will be critically important. Working closely with the chamber, the EDC, you have a very strong chamber and EDC here, but really thinking how you partner with them around targeted business attraction and retention, specifically on the North Nevada corridor. And then, perhaps most importantly, thinking about enabling legislation, right? What the public affairs strategy will be for the organization so that you can go out and assert leverage to bring on new resources and laws that will help you to accelerate the development and service to this community. I wanted to highlight just a couple of quick real-world examples of redevelopment corporations that are out there in the United States, some of which you may have visited in this room. The first, Rodney Milton can tell you a ton about, which is the Atlanta Beltline. So they have a system of 22 miles of old railroad tracks that have come together in this beautiful community, right, where you have trails and parks and transit, but it also has catalytic hubs for economic development where tech companies are coming in and bringing real value to the community. And so it has attracted about $9 billion of private investment into this area and has created thousands of jobs. It's getting almost impossible to find homes near and around the Beltline because people are so drawn to this community. You have many of the assets that we see along the Atlanta Beltline, and so this, I believe, is a really wonderful aspirational model for you to consider. Bring it down to earth just a little bit. Know that there are much smaller communities as well that are engaging these structures and getting traction. Looking at the Memphis Riverfront Development Corporation, they're thinking critically about the use and reactivation of the Mississippi River, and their nonprofit board is also thinking through, land assembly and real estate development in a way that's already paying dividends to their community to the tune for about $4 million in revenues each year that are coming in. So all of those pretty pictures and many of the ones that you've seen from my colleagues here, they don't come together by themselves. There was a lot of hard work and strategy that really precipitated those projects coming to life. But behind all of that hard work and strategy was a full tool belt of financial tools and strategies. If ever you've had like a faucet break at your house or maybe a light switch cover falls off, it gets really frustrating when you go to your toolbox and you don't have the right thing to make that repair at home. My wife yells at me about that all of the time, right? But it's the same thing with these financial tools. This list is not comprehensive, but it really represents sort of the bread and butter of economic development, especially for large-scale redevelopment projects. Briefly speaking to legislation, when my colleague Michael was up and he talked about Cornell Tech and he spotlighted numerous innovation neighborhoods across the United States, most of the largest innovation neighborhoods have actually had enabling legislation from their state legislatures that have helped to create baseline investment. Even down in Denver, many of you have been to the stock show and know about the National Western Center development. Through our state legislature, there was about $400 million of enabling investment that came through from two core bills into the state of Colorado, and that's just one of several examples. Local, state, and federal grants will continue to be important. This is sort of a shifting sand environment where you have to constantly think through the current sources, whether they're federal or state, to determine whether or not they're going to be here from one decade to the next, understanding that local, state, and federal political issues will directly impact the availability of those funds. One good example is the Economic Development Administration's EDA Tech Hub grant that Colorado recently participated in through our quantum computing cluster. P3s, public-private partnerships. For anybody who deals with P3s, there's often an expression that if you've seen one P3, you've seen one P3. The idea here is that they're such unique instruments that they're like a thumbprint, right? Each one has a unique identity, but one of the things they share in common is that public entities and the private sector come together, and that the private sector will kind of take on a little bit of the risk, the burden of design, build, operate, and maintain, but then they share on the upside, the monetization of key parcels and opportunities. And so it's a critical tool that gives you a great deal of leverage and flexibility. Urban renewal, a tool that you are already using, I think, effectively in this community. Urban renewal really gives you sort of the platform to first identify blight in the community and really determine how you can use future tax increment that can be reinvested for future development in that area. So thinking of urban renewal as a baseline, tax increment financing sort of folds over the top of that with special districts and other mechanisms that allow you to find new sort of tax increment that you can continue to funnel into key projects. It's like different flavors of ice cream, especially in the special districts. You can really target, fiber implementation or other elements. So once you start to have some of these tools in place and you've started to assemble parcels and more development is happening, there's a great opportunity to start pursuing financing, leveraging those incomes through municipal bonds and loans and other sort of last mile financing instruments. New market tax credits. My colleague Hal reminded me about this yesterday. They're also a wonderful tool that really allows you to work with a community development entity to get a 7-year tax credit, which can be transformational for communities, especially that have a certain income in the community. And then finally, philanthropy. You have a strong philanthropic base here in the Pikes Peak region. Oftentimes, philanthropy has one of the toughest jobs because they are getting a sea of requests that come in. To have a really effective strategy, think about pulling them together around one compelling vision, right? And working collaboratively to think how you might get transformational investments from philanthropy. Now that I've given a quick overview of the various tools in the belt, I just wanted to spotlight a couple of things that you might want to consider creatively around the financial tools that you have at your disposal. So that the current urban renewal area that you have in place, that is actually with the TIF that has a 25-year horizon is getting ready to expire. And so this is actually an exciting opportunity for you because in 2029, you have an opportunity to reimagine how the boundary for that area is drawn and maybe shift some things around. When an urban renewal area is created, it's created around blight. Well, if you look at your Costco, maybe there's not blight in there anymore, right? So maybe you might shift the urban renewal area and a special district or the TIF so that you can capture light industrial behind Nevada, or even think about creating a brand new opportunity to create a new special district around the Greyhound Stadium that was spoken about by Todd. So this is a really interesting opportunity to reassess how you are using these tools and to redraw key boundaries that can create new increment or revenues that you can use for future development, for infrastructure, and to move your project forward decisively. Finally, one of the things you might consider with the incredible economic asset you have with the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, is to engage with the university to talk about the possibility of a land swap, really thinking through how you can leverage the university's zero tax base as a state institution to swap that out and get pretty significant incremental revenues, right, by working creatively to leverage this community partner that you have at the table. This is really a powerful strategy to bring in new resources for the community. And so to pull this all together, this really is the turning point for this community around the North Nevada corridor, and you have a very clear line of sight to milestones that you can begin working on today to start realizing this vision. So again, creating an independent redevelopment corporation that really brings together various influential entities across your community, so you can take some time to think through who will be in the seats on that bus that will serve on that board of directors, doing a national search for a powerful and focused chief executive officer that will really drive the bus and bring this community where it wants to go. Taking some time to thoughtfully reevaluate how you're using your current financial instruments, those various overlays that you currently have in place, and taking some time to shift those in 2029, considering leveraging UCCS and land swap, and then finally competing to win. So by following this roadmap and all of these incredible recommendations that our colleagues have worked very hard on, we feel that this will enable you to compete more effectively to bring more resources to the North Nevada corridor. With that, it's been a pleasure to be with you, and it's my privilege to bring back the chair of our panel, Glinda.
So you're probably on overload by this time, but we're almost there, and we welcome your questions, of course. I don't think there's any denying that this North Nevada corridor is a very complicated mix of uses, and it's kind of been that area that's been passed through or passed over many years. And you've got those two anchors with the university and downtown that are developing and thriving. And so connecting those two anchors and generating those viable clusters for commerce and learning and livability, it is going to be a heavy lift. It's one that takes time. It's a long-term project. It takes patience. It takes creative resources, as you've heard. It takes very bold leadership, and it takes big thinking. But I don't think there are many cities across this country who are better prepared to do that. You've proven that over and over in this community. I mean, just look at the renewed downtown activity. I was fortunate to be here in 2012 on the ULI panel that looked at downtown. And when I see it now and all the significant changes, it's a real wow factor, quite honestly. And so your community is always willing to take on a challenge and to deliver on it. And I don't think this is going to be any different for you. So I need to reinforce a couple things to kind of tell you what you've heard. You've heard opportunities around defined sectors with that R&D tech hub, the focus on wellness and health, the sports performance tech, and the development of the active innovation neighborhood. You've heard best practices around market potential and development program and design possibilities, and certainly implementation as well. You've also heard that the panel believes that there's a need to reevaluate and streamline and simplify some of the existing policies and processes that are out there. And then you've also heard that robust and consistent communication with stakeholders in the corridor is critical as you move forward, and also to look at broader citizen participation and engagement to really develop those enthusiastic advocates across the community. It's going to be imperative, we feel, to seek engagement from the U.S. Olympic Committee, the governing bodies of the Olympics, and the military for involvement in this North Nevada corridor, because they could have a major stake in this area. The panel's going to give you a call to action. You're the city of champions, and as we've said, it's time to identify a new champion for the North Nevada Avenue corridor, and that should be that new redevelopment corporation. That will put politics aside or pride of any individual ownership, and it captures the strengths of all those appropriate stakeholders, as Anthony told you. It can prioritize projects, prioritize development ideas and sites, and it can drive the right investment at the right time. So we believe as a panel that the City of Colorado Springs and its utility must take the lead and be the first in making those foundational investments that will show commitment to the area and attract private investment. And you've heard that through the presentations. We believe that the mayor and city council must work together and solidify around the North Nevada Avenue as #1 priority in the community at this time. Giving that designation or brand to the corridor is going to make the community realize that something's happening here. It will build excitement and make voices in the area want to buy in to the vision and to feel ownership to the change. And then aggressive advocacy to identify and attract both state and federal resources must occur, and that may at times require a third party to be brought in to be effective for those advocacy efforts. Colorado Springs, we know, has unparalleled beauty, and we've talked about that. That's really the asset that everywhere you look is visible. And you also have unparalleled spirit to get things done. And we feel that now is the time for you to aggressively communicate that the North Nevada Avenue is the city's next big idea, and to communicate that clear vision to seize the moment and make things happen. During that 2012 ULI Downtown panel, we shared a quote that's on the wall in the Olympic Training Center that we felt was appropriate at the time. And again, it seems very appropriate. Success is a journey, not a destination. And the remainder of that quote from Arthur Ashe is, "The doing is usually more important than the outcome." So think about that as you move forward with this initiative. This time in the history of Colorado Springs is a turning point, as we've said over and over. It's a time to connect sports and training and resilience and innovation and defense and endurance. It's a time to hitch your stride. We thought that stride was something that you could pick up on and kind of use as you move forward. So, as is typical with ULI panels, we always give you an assignment for Monday morning. And this is your assignment. We want the public and private stakeholders to gather and to begin that conversation around the process to create the champion, the Independent Redevelopment Corporation, that new champion that will focus solely and day to day on the North Nevada Avenue corridor. Let me just say that this week has been an exceptional experience for our panel. We've gotten to know Colorado Springs so much better. We've gotten to know many of you. And, you know, your spirit is so contagious. And your confidence is also something that we admire. And we applaud you for that. It's a great place to call home. And it's a great place to visit. Our panel believes that that same spirit and that same confidence is going to transform this corridor. And we look forward to seeing all your work and realizing what you bring about in the future. So again, we thank you for the opportunity to be here. So we are going to, whoa.
I don't know that we're running behind. So
Okay, yeah. We're just going to address a few of these questions. I know that we've run over a little bit, but we felt it was all very important information for you. So I'm going to start with these, and I'm going to hand it to one of our panel members or ask whoever would like to address it. A lot of overlap with... Oh, yeah. If you do have a question, please let us know. Raise your hand, and we'll give you a card so that we can take care of that for you. A lot of overlap with the downtown. How can this neighborhood interplay with downtown without cannibalizing one another? And this is something we talked about a lot on our panel. So, David, can I ask you to handle that?
Please. So I think it's an excellent question, and I'm going to approach it from the perspective of one particular land use, one that I happen to be more familiar with than all the others, which is retail. And so when you're looking at downtown in the North Nevada corridor, I think that there are a couple of things that it's important to keep in mind. The first is different kinds of uses want to go in different areas. Just by a show of hands, I'm just curious, how many of you would willingly make a right-hand turn to get a cup of coffee when you're on your rush to work in the morning? A right-hand turn into a Starbucks. Okay, how many of you are going to be willing to make a left-hand turn? Okay, so it's important. Things go in different places for a reason, and it's the reason that the retail along the corridor is really at the south and then at the north end. Downtown has a much different character than the corridor. It's a different kind of place for a different experience. And we don't want to compete with downtown. We don't want to try to replicate something. I hear so often people saying, oh, we want a project like that. But I'll tell you that for every great retail district out there, there's an anti-district. So for Fifth Avenue in New York, there's Chelsea, okay? And what we want is for North Nevada to be a differentiated area. And we want it to be a unique place that you go to on its own merits, not because it's replicated something else.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, how are these recommendations different from the plan that was done 10 years ago? And how will this be implemented? I think we've answered the how will this be implemented by forming that redevelopment corporation and letting them take the lead will really be the implementer for the future of whatever happens here. But who'd like to take, how does this differ from the plans 10 years ago? Hal, you want to take that?
Sure. We did read the plans from 10 years ago, and we thought a lot of good work went into those plans. We didn't try to start over again, so our recommendations are just building on those. Recognizing 10 years gone by, things have happened here that influences what to go forward, and even our recommendation is to take a look at those, what's been done, look at the recommendations we've made, and then build on those with a new strategy to go forward. So there's a lot of good work done. We're not seeing a huge course correction, but we're seeing something that builds on that with maybe a more robust urban vision in mind than what that plan's identified then.
And Hal, there's a question here for you specifically. Any ideas on the dog track?
On the dog tracks? Well, Todd has identified something there. My personal feeling, it could be used for a commercial office development, but I could really see a mixture of open space, some parks there surrounded by housing. I think that would be ideal. Use in that location, I think it would really be the proximity to the university and the large open space. And you need open space in this area. There's none really existing right there, and part of the ultimate plan needs to include that there.
And we heard a lot of ideas about that during our interviews, right. Outdoor venues, the things that Hal talked about. So there's a lot of opportunities there.
Linda, one idea that came up in one of my interviews was, with the name of adaptive reuse in mind, can you keep the dog track and make it a little bit more family focused, like go-karts or recreation, and then build and densify around it?
Okay, here's a question. How would you suggest addressing the unhoused if manufactured housing is part of the solution along the creek?
The unhoused. Homelessness is a challenge for all of our community and all across the country, and it's a deep dive. It does not get solved easily. It takes a combination of social services to find placement for the individuals and to provide services, wraparound services to really help them. So I think I can't give you an easy answer for that one because there are not any easy answers. But you do need to look at it closely and come up with the best strategy that Colorado Springs can offer, because it is a problem throughout our communities, throughout our whole country.
In my own city of Orlando, Florida, we've been working with our social service agencies for many, many years and trying to deal with the homeless issue. And it is very complicated. And some cities have better practices than others. but we do see that you're experiencing some of those issues here in Colorado Springs. And I think that's something that the community is just going to have to come together with your faith-based community, with your social service agencies, and try to come up with the best solution here in Colorado Springs. We've had so many plans and no action. So who owns this plan? I think we've addressed that. A redevelopment corporation would own the plan, and how to pay for it. And again, I think Anthony touched on some of those issues. I don't know if you want to add anything more, Anthony, to that.
You know, I will just say very quickly that moving aggressively to adopt these structures is part of it, but looking for new social activities in this community to continue to bring leaders together to discuss these things sort of off the clock, I think is really important in building that social infrastructure in the community to move things forward.
Okay, Todd, I think this is one that you might want to address. How can this redevelopment create an appropriate transition through the city's first historic neighborhood?
Great question, and we were able to tour that neighborhood, and we appreciate the historic homes that are there, many of which are on the register, and the proximity to Colorado College, and really in some ways one of the front doors into downtown Colorado Springs. So I think we were very aware of the fact that we have downtown, and we have this really great neighborhood. Then we have the North Nevada corridor, and then we have the university and the shopping that is at the north end. So our vision here is really to complement all of those things, right, and not to compete. As Hal was saying, and David earlier, one of the things, we don't want to compete with downtown, and we don't want to compete with these other neighborhoods. We want to complement them. And so, from a retail perspective, David mentioned, if you're working or living in the North Nevada, innovation neighborhood, you shouldn't necessarily have to go north on the other side of Garden of the Gods or Austin Bluffs to go, get your average daily needs or to buy a sandwich or a cup of coffee. Now, if you need to go to Costco or Lowe's, that's where you go, right? So we're not, I think, competing with those areas. We want to complement them. And this area would be very different because the mix of uses that is here would be very different than that neighborhood, right? So that's a very solid single-family detached neighborhood. A lot of long-term residents and even generational from what we heard. This neighborhood is very diverse. It is diverse today, and as we talked about, would remain diverse in the future.
Michael, I think this is a good question for you. Military research and tied to the university is a need. Do you want to expand on that a little bit, what we talked about in our panel discussions?
Sure. I mean, without really understanding the nature of military research and its degree of confidentiality, we think that there's a huge opportunity to leverage existing research at UCCS and attract more faculty to expand their research in their labs. So there's a great I did have a conversation. I won't name someone who told it to me, but if there was one challenge UCCS has, it's attracting more aerospace faculty. So I think creating an opportunity to create facilities and have facilities to attract faculty, give them the labs to work on expanding their research, and then having the industrial partnerships and corporate partnerships to help them accelerate that research. I think it's a very unique opportunity in this place. There are very few places in the country that have kind of the strength of aerospace and DoD together and the existence of Space Force that could actually become a real national hub, not just kind of a local hub for the region or the state, but I think it could give this place real national prominence.
Anthony, you talked about the land swap potential with the university, and this question is about asking more detail on that and how it benefits the university.
Absolutely. Well, a couple of quick thoughts there. One of the things that's really difficult about having a university or any major entity near a blighted area like North Nevada corridor is it directly impacts your ability to market, bring new students. It's directly impacting people's perceptions, right, of the university, the neighborhood, the safety of the area, whether it's viable. You know, as somebody who's got a daughter who's 10 years old who, gosh, I'm going to blink and she'll be going to college, I'll be thinking critically about the types of experiences she has when she comes into a college environment. So taking some time to partner around a swap to elevate the entire performance and livability of the North Nevada corridor, I think will directly impact the future revenues and enrollment for the university, especially in a highly competitive space where we're experiencing, as UCCS folks know well, a demographic cliff. So fewer babies are being born, fewer kids are going to high school, and so fewer folks are enrolling in college, which means that revenues are challenged and becoming more competitive across the United States. So being a good community partner, looking at land swaps to try to elevate the whole of the area, I think will have a positive impact for the university. One of the things that I would actually recommend if you start to look at a land swap is to really bring in a public finance consultant to really look at the details for how that is configured. There's some really delicate timing issues for sort of the last appraised value of those parcels by the tax assessor, but I think that there are numerous benefits to the university to be flexible and thoughtful about the possibility of examining a swap to elevate the entirety of the area for your marketing and future revenue purposes for enrollment.
And there was a comment on one of these questions, just said safety. And that was not something that we were asked to address, and we don't have any crime stats or anything like that for this corridor area, but it is certainly something that a few of you brought up during those interviews, and it's something that the community needs to address if there are safety concerns in that corridor. And as you go through this transformation and develop this innovation neighborhood, certainly your police department and public safety, and again, social service agencies, faith-based communities, and everyone needs to come together to address any safety concerns for the future.
Glenda, could I just jump in on
Yes,
that too? I
please.
think one thing, while we didn't specifically talk about safety, when we talk about increasing density, it really increases the eyes and presence on that corridor, which consequently will increase safety in that area. So again, one of the reasons why all of the alternatives that we looked at all increased density was, again, thinking of that, the overall impact of safety on the community.
Yeah, I think bottom line, the more activity you have in areas and the type of activity that you have in areas, that's going to make places safer. So, are there any other questions? Those were the cards that we received. Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. We appreciate your patience this morning with us. We wish you the very best as you move forward with this big idea for Colorado Springs, and we wish you every success. Thank you.